Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so we are going to get moving with tonight's live online workshop. I want to welcome everyone to the Learning Liaisons. If this is your first time with us, we thank you for spending time after a busy day to join us. If you are a returning guest, well, we welcome you with open arms, and I'm sure you are going to get a lot of valuable information out of tonight's session. Tonight we are welcoming Dr. Lisa Riegel, who's the Executive Director of the Educational Partnerships Institute, and she's based out of Ohio. And she has taught high school, undergraduate, and graduate level courses, public school, and both at the collegiate level, of course. She works with school districts and school leaders closely to build partnerships. And she actually has dual bachelor degrees in English and secondary language from Kent State University, a master's in curriculum instruction from Otterbein University, and a PhD in educational administration from The Ohio State. So I want to thank Dr. Riegel for joining us tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and turn over the mic to her. And we thank you once again, and we definitely encourage comments and questions in the chat box, and we will dedicate a few moments at the end for any specific questions. So, are you with us, Dr. Riegel?
I am. Can you hear me? Terrific. Well, thank you for joining us tonight and taking out some time. I know it sounds like most of you, or a lot of you, are in Florida and would probably rather be outside right now, or maybe not because it's too hot. I'm excited to present this to you tonight because I think people, when they think about assessment, tend to have negative connotations with that because we are so inundated with testing, and we consider assessment and testing sort of in the same vein. I try to work with schools. Tonight's presentation is based out of a book that we wrote called It's Not About the Test. And the graphic on the front cover there is a 7-step system that we've come up with on how to work through creating better assessments in your classroom, how to use data from both big tests and your classroom assessments to improve instruction and improve success for students. So my background a little bit, I'm very interested in the non-academic barriers to learning. I spend a lot of time thinking about and working with schools to help them build motivational strategies to help students succeed. So we do a lot of work with motivation. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that and how you can use motivation in your instructional design. My biggest goal tonight is to make you uncomfortable, because if you're not uncomfortable, we don't change. So I know myself, if you start to put on a couple extra pounds and your pants don't fit, they have to get pretty uncomfortable until you actually change your behavior and go on that diet. So it's the same thing here. I know you can spend a lot of times with the diet analogy. You can spend times blaming your spouse for shrinking your pants, or you can blame time for the designer cutting the cut very thin. But until you actually get on the scale and see that things aren't going so well, you don't change your behavior. And so I'm hoping tonight, as I'm talking, that there will be some of the strategies that I talk about based on what I see in schools. I spend a lot of time in schools working with teachers and with administrators on both system level things and then also on classroom changes that you can make. And I'm hoping that you're going to hear some things tonight that you're going to say, ooh, I do that, and maybe I need to rethink that. So I'm hoping I make you uncomfortable, and when I do, please, feel free to get into that chat box and ask questions or share your own experiences. So we're going to start out by learning a little bit about motivation theory and using it as a framework to engage students. And then my hope is you'll walk away tonight with a little bit of that theoretical framework, but also concrete strategies that you can use in your instructional design, and also actions that you can use to build efficacy and influence how families value learning. So this little wheel here I call the positivity wheel, and this positivity wheel is really just why we do behavior. So you think you're motivated to do something, and then you do it, and then you get feedback. And so, for example, if I'm a little kid and the stove is really red hot and I like the color red, I might go touch the stove, and then that's my performance, is touching it, and then my feedback is that I burn my hand, and so that's negative feedback, so I'm not motivated to do that behavior again. It also works, and in fact what we're finding is it works a lot better when it's positive feedback. And so if I'm motivated to do something and then I do the performance and I get positive feedback, it will motivate me to repeat that performance. So when we think about this wheel, teachers have a lot of power to control quite a bit of it. You can set up your classroom so that it's a motivating classroom, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And then when the students do the performance, then the feedback that you provide can also help to reinforce the behaviors that you want kids to do. When we think about motivation, thinking about what are students actually motivated to do. And I know I have 2 kids, and they're both very motivated to play video games. And that's not an accident. Video game designers understand motivation, and they develop the video games in a way to make sure that they're motivating and that they keep kids playing. When you think about expectancy times value equals motivation, that's a motivation equation, and expectancy means I expect to do well and I feel like I can do the work. So it's a sense of kind of self-confidence, of a sense of pride in that you know you can do it. You don't have to worry about failing. And so when you think about that in the realm of video games create expectancy because they never take you to the level where you have to build a house until you have a hammer. You have to pass the level and get the hammer first. And so you never get stuck in a video game where it's way beyond what you're capable of doing, and you have to continue to try and fail over and over again. Even some video games that are the first player video games, they'll have little people that'll pop out and give you hints, or you even work in teams together online to make sure that you can never get to a level that you're not prepared to do. But in schools, when you think of this through the realm of a classroom, a lot of students come in and they don't have the hammer, but we're asking them to build the house. And then when you think about the value side of the equation, do they value what you're doing? Do they get peer support? That's important to kids. Do they value the content and understand why they need to know that content? So that's where, teachers hear a lot about the relevancy. That's why it's so important, is because it builds the value. When you don't feel high expectancy, your motivation is drastically affected, and so is the way you value what you're trying to do. So I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here a little bit, but my mom is older, and she struggles a lot with technology, and we have laminated instructions for the DVD. We have laminated right next to the little remote control. I've also sat with her and tried to teach her how to use the computer and how to do, email and attach things. And she gets very frustrated. Her expectancy is very low. She just can't do it. And she keeps trying, and I give her instructions, and it's just not intuitive to her. And so she gets frustrated. So she has very low expectancy when it comes to technology. Instead of keeping a high value on technology, that would be uncomfortable, because if I value something but I don't know how to do it, that would make me very uncomfortable. So what she starts doing is saying things like, well, I don't know why we have to use all this technology anyways. It was fine the way it was when I was younger, and why do we have to have everything so complicated? And so the value of that technology goes down in her eyes. So I want you to think about that in your classroom. If students are coming in and they don't expect to do well and they don't have high expectancy, then it will be completely natural for them to break down the value of your classroom, to say this is stupid, or I'm bored, or I don't want to do this anymore, because they have to do that in order to not feel bad about the fact that they're so far away from reaching their goals. In schools right now, we actually the setup for schools is the antithesis of building this expectancy. This is sort of the factory model of education we currently have. So you have a child who comes who's 9 years old, and who knows, maybe the child's only even been in the country for 48 seconds, but they're 9, so we put them into grade 3. And then we march them all together, all in the sync, and everybody does the same grade level content, so they're all prepared for the test at the end of the grade, regardless of what they come with background knowledge. And then we give them a test. And then you see the little gap at the grade 3 test, and then over the summer you can see there through the diagram that everybody has the exact same experience. So when they come back in the fall, then we just spend a couple weeks doing some reminder remediation, and then we move into marching everybody together again through grade 4, grade 5, and on up through high school. And we know this doesn't work. We absolutely know, and we know this for a number of reasons. We know it because our achievement gaps are enormous and not closing. We know this because if you've taught for even a month, you see the differences in the students in your classroom. So this is really what we live. We live this sort of, kids maybe learn really quickly some things that they find fascinating, and then other things that they take a long time to learn, especially with the little kids. sometimes they go home at night and all of a sudden their brain grows overnight, and then they come in the next day and what was really hard yesterday isn't hard anymore because they've just had some cognitive development. And we don't give kids the chance to kind of slow down and take things at their pace because we're busy with that factory model. So in the real world, you can build efficacy in this model. You can build a sense of expectancy because you can meet kids where they are and then you can take them to where they need to be. So thinking about your own classrooms, do your projects and assignments build that sense of efficacy and expectancy? Efficacy is a sense that I can overcome the barriers and I can do this. So it's very much related to the idea of high expectancy. What I see in a lot of classrooms I go to, especially at the elementary level, is that they have morning work. And so the children come in and do morning work, and the differentiation is, well, he's low, so he'll build the doghouse, and he's a really good student, so he'll build the mansion. But the problem is, what if he doesn't have the hammer? We're not addressing the problem. He doesn't have the prerequisite skill to even do the building yet. And so when you think about that model, if all the kids are receiving the same amount of morning work and the same content in that morning work, for the kid who can't even build the doghouse yet, basically what we're saying is, oh, we're so excited you're here, and we hope you're motivated about school, but we're going to go ahead and every day in the beginning of class, we're going to confirm that you're the dumb kid. And so I'm going to give you this packet that you are not prepared to do, and I know that you can't do it because I already know that you're 2 grade levels below, but I'm going to give you this packet anyways, and then I'm going to wonder why you're rolling around on the floor, poking your neighbor, or going to the bathroom 52 times, and I'm going to get angry with you, and we're going to have discipline problems now. And so thinking about that for a moment in your classroom, when you do full group instruction and when you do all the kids do the same assignment, or when you're only differentiating this child does half the problems and this child does all the problems, then you're not really setting the stage in a classroom where kids are going to have that sense of self-efficacy and expect to do well. So here's something you can do that's not that hard. You don't have to throw out what you do, but you can just add a little bit of stretch to your assignments. So for example, this was with a teacher I worked with in a school around here, and I said, just bring your stuff, bring anything that you use. And it was holiday time, and she had the kids do some math problems inside this Christmas tree. And so I said, okay, if you have 2 children who get a 4 out of 10 on the Christmas tree on the left, then what do you know? And she just kind of looked at me and said, well, they need remediation. And I said, okay, but what do you know? Why did they get a 4 out of 10? And the answer is, on the left side of the screen, that tree, she doesn't know what happened. So the question becomes, okay, could we add a couple things in the packages below the tree to say, well, before the children can do the math problems inside the tree on the left, what do they need to know? And she said, well, they would need to know quantities. And I said, okay, let's put some quantity questions in the packages below. And then we have a star on the top of the tree. Let's put some problems in there that would be extension problems. So now you get 2 children who get 4 out of 10. One student gets all the packages wrong and then gets a few right in the tree and gets the star wrong. The other child gets the star correct, gets all the packages in the tree correct, and gets misses all the problems in the tree. So then you start asking yourself, well, what's going on here? So now you've got 2 kids with 4 out of 10 and the problems in the tree, and you say, what's happened? Well, one child knows the prerequisite skill. The other child does not. And so normally what we would do if the child received a 4 out of 10 is we'd pull them to the table to do remediation, which is fine, except the one child doesn't need remediation. And so as those 2 children sit at your table and you work them through the problem, the one who really needed the remediation may still not get it, and the one who didn't need it at all be like, oh yeah, that's right, oh okay, yeah, quantities, and you're thinking, oh, I've got a really good intervention here, they get it, and now we're getting somewhere. But the reality is you don't have a good intervention because the child didn't need remediated on that, they already knew that. And so creating just a little bit of stretch in your assignments can help you take a look at why are children performing the way they are. And this is something I think that we're not really trained to do as teachers. When we think about assessment, we want to think about how do we always answer the question why. It's not about what the student demonstrated, it's about why the student missed what they missed, so that you can then use that to inform your instruction. But if we don't write the assessments in a way where we can get at that prerequisite knowledge, and also look at the extensions. If you have a child who gets the STAR questions right and the packages questions, what you may find is that looking at the questions in the tree, maybe they just missed all the ones that had 7s. So now the remediation isn't, I need to go back and do quantities, it's go practice your math facts with 7s, where the other child who really needs the remediation, you can give more attention to. The other thing you can do is you can look at failing as a positive. Kids are terrified of failing right now, and so when you look at this reframing of the failing, there's a woman in Hilliard near me, which is a suburban school in Columbus, and I just love her classroom. She has this sign up there, and it says first attempt in learning, and it's the fail sign. And so what she does is she'll have, when she does like a math lesson, she will have the kids do a math problem at their tables. And so again, you've got kids who maybe aren't quite ready and kids who are, ready to move on, but they work together as a team in a mixed ability group. They tackle a problem, and then the teacher will put the right answer on the board. And then, okay, who got the answer right? And a lot of times if it's their first attempt, a lot of kids got things wrong because they made faulty errors. So who got it right? And if there's a group that got it right, that's great. Tell us how your thinking went. And then for the students who didn't get it right, so here, what are the answers you got? And then they list the answers, and then the teacher says, okay, now go back and tell me what was the faulty thinking. So on this fail sign, as the kids figure out what the faulty thinking is, she celebrates that they found it, because now we failed, we realized how we failed, and we're going to celebrate that we don't have to do that again because we've learned the faulty thinking. So she says, okay, so let's put your faulty thinking on the fail board. So then the kids will come up and write the faulty thinking down, and then when they're finished with that, they have a great visual check that they can look at up on the board, that when they're trying to do the problems on their own, they can say, oh, that's right, I have to think about it a different way. So you're getting at not just can they get the answer right or wrong, but you're really getting at the thinking that goes on behind the answer, and were they able to do the correct thinking. It also gives kids a chance who aren't quite ready for the problem. Maybe they can figure out what the faulty thinking was. They couldn't have done the problem independently, but now you've got them in a group where the whole goal is to figure out what we're going to do to screw it up. So kids really enjoy this, and then as the children are working in the lesson, if they make mistakes that are related to the faulty thinking, you can say, oh, you found an awesome example of faulty thinking, so I want you to put that example up on our fail board. And then as you move towards your summative test, you can say to kids, make sure when you're doing these problems that you're referencing the fail board and not making those faulty thinking errors. And it gives a chance for kids to really think about not just how do I compute things, but actually thinking about the thinking behind it. And this works in any subject, even though I was just talking about math. The other thing you can do is ask what's wrong with this answer. So team them up for morning work, have the groups work together and give them the wrong answer, and then ask them to figure out what the faulty thinking is and to share with each other what they would do to teach the student who answered the question wrong. And this is really nice too. If you're a novice teacher, you might not know what the faulty thinking is. I remember when I first started teaching and I had a near panic attack the night before because I was teaching freshmen and I had no idea what they thought was funny, because I hadn't done my student teaching with that age group. And so I was really panicked because I didn't know what I would say that would resonate with them, and I got very nervous. Well, especially in those first few years, you don't know. And so let the kids tell you. They can tell you how they think about things, and as you're learning your curriculum, it can give you a better understanding of, oh, these are the areas that kids are going to struggle. So I might start to change my introduction. I might start to change my lesson. I might start to change the way I talk about this kind of a function or content, and so that I can predict what the kids are going to struggle with. And this is a great way to help involve them in that process. Another thing you can do, this is not necessarily assessment related, but to build self-efficacy, there's some easy things you can do in your classroom. One of them is, tell me 2 good things that happened today. And having kids reframe school through a positive lens. When you start to do this with children, they won't be able to tell you. They'll tell you what didn't happen, and their positivity is the absence of bad things. And so getting them to start looking for good things. So for example, they might say, well, I didn't get beat up, or nobody was mean to me today. Well, that's not a good thing. That's just the absence of a bad thing. So tell me 2 good things that happened today. And if the kids know that they have to do that as an exit ticket, or that you have some type of positive reward in your class to talk about that, then they'll start to look for positive things. Our schools right now are really full of a lot of anxiety, and the climate among teachers and students is one of real fear. We have a kind of epidemic in this country around anxiety. 25% of our teenagers have stress-induced anxiety disorders, and so that means they actually scored in the clinical range on anxiety assessments. And this is from the National Institute of Health's 2015 statistics. And 13% of our little ones from ages 8 through 12 have stress-related anxiety disorders. And so we're doing that. We're creating these environments that are so stressful. And so helping kids reframe into a positive light can go a long way in building their sense of self, giving them a little bit of freedom in their classroom to fail, a little freedom to try and try again, can really help them learn to believe in themselves as learners. There's some threats to building expectancy, and one of it is stress. And unfortunately, stress kills memory cells, and it can lead to apathy if you have toxic stress over a long period of time. And so one of the things we really need to think about, again, is that positivity. How do we always frame things in the positive? Because kids won't respond to negative messages. And I have that little rat up there because, unfortunately, humans are not all that different from rats when it comes to behavior research. So what they did with rats is they put them in the cage and they put cheese in front of them. And then the rats were able to eat the cheese. And then eventually what they did when the rat went to eat the cheese, they gave them a negative shock. So they used a little electrode and shocked them. Well, after a little while, as we would imagine, the rat learned not to eat the cheese. And so then they took the shock away and put the cheese back in front of the rat, and it would not eat. And in fact, not only did it not eat, it died. It sat in the cage and died with the cheese right outside of its mouth. So when we think about that in the realm of human behavior and in the realm of school, we have students who, after they get so many shocks, they become apathetic. And so when we have negative kind of gotcha experiences, when we're not building expectancy in our classroom, eventually they get to an apathetic state. And the unfortunate thing too is that stress and toxic stress, with a lot of children are living in toxic stress, kills memory cells. It doesn't kill the cells that we wish it would kill, like the ones that make us do bad things or make us form bad habits. It kills the ones that we want to keep. So a lot of the schools I work with that are in high poverty areas where kids are in constant and toxic stress, they'll talk about how the kids, well, we got it, and then they came back and they don't remember it anymore. It's like every week they come back and they can't remember what we just learned, even though they had it last week. And so after doing that for a while, and if you don't have the correct supports in your classroom, you are going to end up with apathetic students. And then we need to have really positive messaging to help overcome that. And so the more you can build within the classroom assessments and the classroom assignments, and just even in your classroom management plan, positive ways that kids can be successful, instead of coming in and feeling like each day they're going to demonstrate how they're not successful, can make a big difference. Here's the anxiety statistic from the National Institute of Health. This is a huge issue in schools right now, and we are struggling to try to figure out what to do about the mental health crises that we see in our kids. But the problem is, when we think about anxiety, the more anxiety they have, the less prepared their brains are to learn. They're in a constant state when you think of fight versus flight, that's the back part of your brain, and what we need is the front part of the brain engaged. And if you're in an overstimulated state in the back part of your brain, then you don't have the thinking capacity to learn. There's also threats to building expectancy with ADHD. The ADHD is an executive function issue, and executive function is what happens in sort of the front prefrontal cortex of the brain, and that the executive function controls our ability to set goals, to break tasks down, to keep track of our time, to be able to adjust and be sort of flexible with what we're trying to accomplish, and basically to get things done. And that's really what school's about. It's about, here's your project, break it down, work on little pieces, set your goals, meet your goals, and then revise, turn it back in. And so kids with ADHD really struggle with that. And right now, 11% of the students in this country have ADHD. So one of the things you can do to help motivate kids, all kids, not just the kids with ADHD or with anxiety, but really think about how you're not only setting up your classroom in a positive way, but also how you're setting up engaging lessons. I always talk about, engagement really is engaging lessons and trust and relationships. And so if you have engaging lessons and kids are excited about what they're doing in your class, and if you've set up your classroom in a positive way where kids feel like you have a good relationship and they can trust you, then you're going to have really motivated and engaged kids. So what we want to think about is capitalizing on what we know works. And so I oftentimes work with teachers, and this is from advertising, and there is an acronym in advertising called AIDA, and that means attention, interest, desire, and action. And so I have a picture of a car there because the car commercials do this really well. So they get your attention, they get some really beautiful woman and this really hot guy, and they're driving in this car, and it's on a road with no potholes on a beautiful day, and they're driving alone, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I want that car, that looks kind of nice. And then they get your interest, and they start doing the kind of talking points about, this car is the brand new car, and it has 400 miles to the gallon and goes 5 million miles an hour, and it comes with this really attractive person, and they kind of get your interest. But then you're thinking, wow, that's really out of my reach. There's no way I can get that car. And then they say, but you can get this car because we have special financing right now, and it's zero down and $5 a month for this great car. And then they give you an action to do, and they say, so come on down and take it for a test drive. So that structure is what sells cars and sells all the other consumer products that we purchase. And so, in the part in the beginning where I was talking about capitalizing on video games insofar as gaining motivation, we should also capitalize on what we know works. 21st century kids are consumers. And so if we can capitalize on what we know about consumers, we can get them engaged in the lesson. And going back to that sort of value piece, they expect to do well from our positivity, and they value what we're doing because we're reaching them in the same way that an advertiser would reach them and get their interest in a product. So let's translate this now to what this looks like in the classroom. So you might start with, and I use this, and I apologize to anybody who's like a geology lover, but the idea of studying dirt, I just can't think of anything that I would not want to study more than dirt. So what am I going to do to get kids' attention around dirt? And so what I would suggest is, what if you had each child, you'd go around and hand one child a piece of notebook paper, and hand another child a paper towel, and hand another child a piece of tissue paper, and maybe somebody else gets some toilet paper. And then you put some rocks on top of the toilet paper and the towel and all that. And then you go around and you pour water, and you see, and what's going to happen? Well, the rocks are going to fall through the toilet paper first, and they're going to not fall through the notebook paper. And so then you ask the kids, well, what just happened? And you've got their attention because you've made a mess, and you've had them holding on and watching this sort of simulation of what would happen, and you've got their attention. So now you need to figure out how to get their interest. So you might say, so why did the rock fall through the paper? And eventually the kids will say, well, that was thinner paper or thicker paper or more sturdy or more fragile or whatever their answers are. And then you can say, soil's like that too. And then show them a video or show them something where you can, watch a house slide down the side of a mountain somewhere, and all of a sudden now they're seeing something that's exciting to watch, and they're like, oh, look at what's going on. You're using technology, you're getting their interests, and now they want to know, well, this is kind of interesting, so what are we going to do about this? Then you need to create the assignment that they want to do. And so in regard to rocks, what if you have them at their tables or in groups, you handed them a plot of a city, and you gave them a grid, and on that grid you had different kinds of soil, and you say, okay, what I want you to do is design a city. And so think about, where would there be good green space, and where would it be good to put your high rise, and where would it not be so good to put a skyscraper, and maybe you should put a patio home, or where would you put your big mansions, and have them build their own little city. And what's nice about this is that in order to build that city, they're going to have to do some research on what kind of rocks there are and what kind of buildings a specific rock would support. And so what's nice is that you're not giving them guided notes on the different kinds of rocks where they sit and write it down, or they read about it in a book and answer questions at the end. You're giving them an authentic assignment that they're going to think about, where they're like, wow, let me look around my city and see where they put different things. You could even take it further and have them go out and collect soil samples from areas around the city to see if different kinds of buildings would be built on different kinds of rock. And so now you've got them kind of engaged and they're hooked, and you've got an assignment that they want to do. And then you have them action. What are you asking them to actually do? And you create that together, and you give them good, clear instructions and clear expectations, and then you just get out of their way. And then they get motivated and excited to do the project. So thinking about your students, what is appealing to a 21st century learner? And that's, I think, one of the issues that I run into a lot when I'm working with teachers is we do a really great job preparing schools for ourselves. So if I was back in school, I could be a really great teacher for myself. But I'm not the one that's the learner, and I should be preparing the kids for what's going to happen in their life, not what would happen currently today, because they're not going to be in the workforce for another 15 years or 10 years. And so what we want to think about is, what are we doing to appeal to the 21st century learner? So here's some things to think about with the 21st century kids. First of all, when we think about schools, what do schools do? They do a slow and controlled release of information from limited sources. You have a textbook, you read it, you do the questions at the end of the book. But kids, 21st century students, quickly receive information from lots of media sources. That's what they prefer. We prefer single processing, single tasks. They like parallel processing and multitasking. The third one always kind of gets me. We like text before pictures. And as a former English teacher, I always felt like it was cheating if you watched the movie first. But what the 21st century students like is processing pictures, sounds, and videos, and then doing text. So my son, who just turned 11, when he has a question, he doesn't even go to Google. He goes to YouTube. And so, thinking about how do you even get your information? A lot of us would still go to Google or go to Google Scholar or wherever you go, or ask a friend. The kids today are so used to navigating multimedia that they will go watch videos. They will read up from how-to chat rooms on, looking up problems that maybe if they've had happen, they can ask Siri. Exactly. We rarely in our family get through a family dinner. It's kind of a joke. We start talking about things, and then somebody doesn't know the answer, and Siri joins us for dinner almost every night because we want to know. My son, when he was 8, was downstairs and he was playing Minecraft. So I felt like as a parent, I should be a good parent and go downstairs and see what he's doing. He had, and I looked at the Minecraft, and he was writing code. He was writing HTML. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I wanted this house to float." So I went on YouTube to find out how to make a house float, and taught me how to write this code. And so, again, let's just get out of their way. Let's get them engaged in something they find interesting, and then back away and just coach them through it. We also provide information linearly, logically, and sequentially. But 21st century students like it random access to hyperlinked and interactive multimedia. They don't mind a web quest that isn't linear. They can go all over. The other thing that I think is really profound is when we think about technology in the classroom, we tend to use technology as a very expensive typewriter in a lot of classes. I see kids go in and they get to type their papers in the computer lab. And, we don't really think about using technology to actually connect kids as a virtual space that we can connect them. And so we have students working independently and in real spaces most of the time. But how 21st century learners like to learn, they like to interact and network simultaneously in virtual and real world spaces. So again, with my kids, I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they play video games with friends, and they might have a couple friends who are here, and then somebody else can't be here, so they have somebody else on Skype, and then they've played with people from other countries, and they're all in the same virtual space. Some of them are here, some of them are virtual, and they're all interacting, and they do it seamlessly. We're the ones that don't do it seamlessly. Sometimes we teach just in case to prepare them for exams. This is one of the biggest issues I run into when I'm coaching teachers, is we talk about really engaging things they can do, and the answer is always, "Oh, I just don't have time. I have to get through all this content to prepare for the exams." And I get it, and I understand the pressures with that, but Kids like to learn just in time. They like learning that's relevant and useful and fun and connected, and the way that we are currently preparing them for state exams is not their preference. And so what we are continuing to see is that we can't test kids to excellence. When you look at the test scores that have come out over the past couple years from some of the big international tests like PISA and NAEP, we're just not competing, and I think part of it is because our focus is on the test and not on the learning. And I'm preaching to the choir because most teachers would agree with that, but what are we doing about it? So does your classroom look like this? And I want to just take a minute before we keep moving on and get a little bit of feedback from you. So please type in the chat box. Do you have any questions so far? And do you have any examples from your own classroom where you've done some things that you feel are really engaging for students? As people are typing in their thoughts, I'm going to respond to some of them. When you talk about having 26 to 30 kids at a time, that is really difficult. 36-year-olds in one room is a challenge. And again, that's where sometimes it makes so much sense to try to get more engaging and more self-directed kinds of lessons for kids, because if you have that many kids in one room and you're the only person who can be the source of information, there's no way you can do it effectively. One of the things I talk about with teachers and with principals when I work with them is about being efficient. We know what works, and so why aren't we doing what works? And sometimes it's because we have all these sort of weird traditions that hang on like an appendage and we can't get rid of. We need to think about how do we do what we know is right. Kevin says, what tips and suggestions do you have for working with students in low socioeconomic and dealing with toxic stress factors? Positivity is the only is the frame from all that. There are a lot of little specific things that you can think about doing. First of all, I think thinking about your morning work, thinking about when kids come in the morning, are they going to first thing in the morning feel positive about themselves, or are they coming to school every day feeling bad about themselves? One thing I talk about sometimes when we talk about non-academic barriers is that every child is like a pop can, like a soda can, and it is full of carbonation, but you can't necessarily see the carbonation. And so some of those children that live in toxic stress may have been kicked down the street and shaken, and by the time they get to your classroom, they are ready to explode. So all you have to do is look at them the wrong way, or say take out your pencil and they forgot their pencil, and they will explode. And so understanding that and thinking about even having some type of a hand signal or something else that the child can let you know. I had a kid that I used to work with, and when he would come in, if he was stressed, if you see my hand, he would just go like that, and it just let me know, you know what, leave me alone for a minute, I just need to decompress until I can get started. And I think it's training yourself to be positive about what you're looking for. I was just in schools today. I did a session on classroom management and really looking at how do you change behaviors. And there's 4 basic reasons why kids misbehave. They're either seeking attention, or they're avoiding something. Sometimes it's a power struggle, and sometimes it's this sense of efficacy. I'm going to disengage and I'm going to get in trouble because I don't believe I can do the work. And so there are ways that you can, once you know why the behavior, what is the purpose the behavior is serving, then you can start to ask yourself, how do we stop the behavior? What I see in schools, and especially in urban schools and in high poverty areas is I see that there is, like, the teachers approach discipline as opposed to really approaching engagement. And so the children come in, and so much of what they're talking about is don't do this or don't do that, or, you know, why are you saying those things? And I want to, one of the examples I use today is when you're thinking about how you talk to children, think about your last staff meeting with your staff, because, you know, just like doctors are the worst patients, sometimes teachers can be the worst students. And I know you all know this. If you look around at your staff meetings, teachers are doing all kinds of behaviors that are not what they are supposed to be doing. And so imagine if your principal spoke to you the way that some of the teachers speak to children. If the principal said, you know, Angela, that's not how we behave in here, and so we need to stop that right now. And if she did that in front of your peers, what would you do? You would either tune out, or you would become defiant, or you would get into a power struggle, and yet we always seem to be a little bit surprised when kids do that. Or if you said, if I came in to observe your classroom and I said, Amaryllis, I knew you could be a great teacher, you just had to try. Like, that would be so insulting to you, but we do that to kids all the time. I knew you could do math, you just had to try. And that makes the assumption that they're not trying. And, you know, when you think about how stressed out the kids are even on their way to school, the fact that they're even there should be celebrated. And so really starting with how do we, make sure that every child comes with the hammer so they're ready to build the projects that we need, and also with the support to know this is a safe place, and this is a place where I don't have to avoid because I feel comfortable knowing that that I'm going to be safe both physically and emotionally. Hands-on interactive learning processes are really great. We don't get kids up moving enough anymore. Let's see, it says the bigger group is harder. Add to that, in Puerto Rico, parents think if the students don't copy from the board, they're not doing anything. You know, that brings up a really good point as well. Parents sometimes, and this is where I start talking about, you know, whose classroom is this? Is it theirs or is it ours? And so when we think about how school was done in our time, it was done differently. And so sometimes it's teaching parents to unlearn the expectations that they have about what should and shouldn't be going on in schools. And I use the analogy sometimes where if you have a heart problem and you go to a cardiologist, the cardiologist today isn't going to cut your chest open, and this is a key point. Even if that cardiologist was the best chest cracker on the planet and makes a beautiful scar, irrelevant, that cardiologist is still not going to cut your chest open, because we have research and technology that tells us there's a better and less painful way to do it. And, you know, we have the same thing in education. We have all this research and technology that we know how to do this, but we continue to crack open chests because that's how we've always done it. And sometimes the parents are a barrier to that, because we have to educate them on what we know about motivation and efficacy, and how do we work with students in a way that's much more, less invasive, like back to the heart thing, like less invasive and more effective. Or, you know, when you think about today, if you went to that cardiologist and they cut your chest open and you found out the guy down the street could do it by running a little, wire up your leg, you would sue the doctor who cut your chest open and you'd win, because that's malpractice, because he did undue harm. But we do undue harm all the time in our classrooms. We know what works, and so sometimes it's educating politicians, sometimes it's educating parents, and sometimes it's educating ourselves. The STEAM-based curriculum is a really great way to help students do some problem-based learning. So is inquiry-based. It's, getting that hands-on activity. Standing up is another thing that's really important for student engagement. Is, if you ever want to see how exhausting school is, go pretend like you're a student for a day and sit through a day. I do a lot of observation in schools, and it is absolutely mind-numbing and exhausting, because as teachers we move around all the time. So we're used to being able to get our energy out, but kids sit idle all the time, and it is exhausting. And then when they get in trouble, we take away recess, and so then again they're not moving. So thinking, how do you incorporate movement in your classroom just by getting hands-on assignments? You don't have to do something separate. This is what I see on this slide. This is what we want, but this is what I see. I see a lot of compliance. I see a lot of, okay, I'll get this done, but how do I do this? And Angela, there you go, lowered one of my tables down to the floor and let the kids sit on pillows. It was amazing how much work they did. And that's something else that, I think when you think about the barriers to some of the expectancy, like I mentioned that, anxiety and ADHD can be barriers to expectancy. What do you, like, some teachers get very, we talk about it, I talk about it in terms of what hill do you want to die on? Like, do you really care if the kids sit on the floor? Who cares if they sit on the floor? Let them sit on the floor. Some kids do better if they have a stand-up desk, especially if they're kids who have hyperactivity tendencies. Having them stand up is a really powerful way to keep them active while they're learning. So what I want to talk about a little bit is to get into the actual academic piece, and please keep the conversation going in the chat box, but I want to talk a little bit about how you can set up your classroom to really be student-centered and engaging. So one of the things we want to do when we think to why do we do this job anyways, we do this job because we want to create lifelong learners. We want to have kids learn how to learn and be engaged in education and be excited about learning new things. So let's look at again, we've looked at medicine models and cardiologists, we've looked at cars, and we've looked at video game designers. Let's look at weight loss. This is another incredibly successful industry in this country. And Weight Watchers, why is it so successful? Well, it's successful because of the way that they structure their support. They start out with looking at your current weight. You get to the first, and if you look at those questions, where am I going and where am I now and how do I close the gap? Those are sort of the main questions of learning as well as Weight Watchers. So when I first go to a Weight Watchers meeting, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to give me a diagnostic test. They're going to give me a pre-test or a pre-assessment or a benchmarking test. They're going to say, where am I now? And I'm going to get on the scale and I'm going to get a number, a valid and reliable score from an assessment. And that is really important because, as I said in the beginning, I can blame my husband or I can blame the designer. I can blame all kinds of things as to why my pants don't fit. But until I actually get on that scale and see the number, now all of a sudden I can't deny that anymore. One of the things we do sometimes too is we don't tell the kids their data because we don't want them to feel bad. But the reality is we need them to feel bad. The other thing I said in the beginning is I'm hoping that I make some of you kind of uncomfortable as we go through some of these examples, that you might see some things that look like your practices that you say, ooh, maybe I should change that. It's the same thing here. We got to let kids be a little bit uncomfortable about where they are. The where am I going is your goal weight. And in Weight Watchers, there isn't one goal weight. Everybody has the same goal, which is to be healthy. But if you're 6'5", your goal weight's going to be different than if you're 5'2". So, thinking in the education classroom, what is the goal? Where are we sending them? Yes, we have a curriculum. Yes, we need to get them to grade level. But if right now they're on rung number 1 of that ladder and somebody else is on rung number 10, then the goals might look a little different. We might start by setting up some smaller goals and some goals that will help build the success along the pathway. And then in Weight Watchers, they actually have a coach. So you monitor your own behaviors and literally keep track of points, what goes in, what comes out. And then you work with a coach who talks about your challenges and how can I help you and what else do you need. And so when you think of this in the classroom, how can the teacher be a coach? Because here's what happens is there's a lot of ways you can diet. And right now, it's easy to go get the 48-hour miracle diet or go do a colonic or go do something where you can lose a few pounds and get in your black dress by Saturday. But by Wednesday of next week, that black dress doesn't fit anymore because you didn't change your behavior. You used a short-term quick fix. What we need is long-term results. And when you think about schools right now, we are living in the short term. We're doing test prep. We're getting kids ready, just, throw content at them so that they can spit it back out on the test, but it's a short-term result, which means in the fall, when we go back and try to figure out where we need to start, the kids haven't retained anything, which is also why we're still teaching basic math in middle school, like basic computational skills. We're still teaching grammar and parts of speech in high school. So we really need to be thinking about how do we move from this short-term version to a more long-term effect. And my argument would be the only way we do that is to put the kid in the driver's seat. Because just like if you look at those different, like the quick trends and the day and night, who is the locus of control of whether or not that woman in the black dress is successful? It's not the woman. It's those medicines that are in the locus of control of whether or not she's successful. What we need is to put her in the driver's seat so that she can get long-term results and learn to learn and learn to be successful so that she can maintain that. So in your class, you would have student-friendly learning targets would be where are you going. You'd have the reliable diagnostic tests and other assessments and rubrics. And then you would have, how do I close the gap? You'd have formative assessments, goal setting, and the teacher as the facilitator, but the student as the driver of learning. And so thinking of how do we incorporate that into our class. So here's something, and you can get this at my website. It's free, and you are more than welcome to it. This is sort of the vertical progression of learning. So when we start thinking about that ladder, and I've done this with so many students before, and the general answer I get is, that's all you wanted? So I'm going to take you through what I do. So on the website, basically I took the entire Common Core, and I realize some of you aren't on Common Core. I know in Ohio it's still Common Core, but we changed a few lines, and now it's Ohio Learning Standards. So it's not wildly different. But I know that the tendency right now is to really have standards that build upon each other instead of having the discrete. So no matter where you are, hopefully you can take this and apply it to your own standards. But in Ohio, what we have is we have these, we have our anchor standard, and then we have the grade level standards. And what you can see here is that in grade 1, it says I can ask and answer questions about key details in a text. In grade 2, the only difference between grade 1 and grade 2 is who, what, when, where, why, and how. The only difference between 2 and 3 is that I can ask and answer those questions and I can refer to the text. So what's underlined is what is new. And so this is how I've used this with students. So I might have somebody read a book and I'll say, so tell me what happened. And they say, oh, well, there's this boy and a dog. Oh, okay, well, what'd they do? Where'd they live? And I prompt them into giving me who, what, when, where, why, and how. And when they finish giving me the who, what, when, where, why, and how, then I say, oh my goodness, do you know that you just grew a whole grade level? You said that this story took place in Paris. How do you know that? And the kid says it right here. And I say, oh my goodness, you just grew a whole nother grade level. You're in 3rd grade now. You want to go to 4th grade? The kid's wearing boots. What season is it? And the kid says, I don't know, winter? You just made an inference. You're in 4th grade now. And 9 times out of 10, the kid will look at you and say, that's all you wanted? Yep, that's all I wanted. Our schools mystify content. Kids have no idea why they're learning what they're learning. When you ask them, even though we post learning targets, we're posting learning targets as a compliance practice. And you say to kids, what are you doing today? And kids don't say the learning target. They say, oh, the teacher gave me this, or we're working on math. They can't articulate what they're learning. And so, again, going back to that Weight Watchers model, if I can't articulate for you what I should eat and how I should exercise and how I should keep track of my own progress, how am I ever going to be successful? But we have that in school all the time. And so you can go, what I've trained teachers to do with this is, like, you can take the whole Common Core is on the website, and so and it's in math and in language arts. Although the math ones, I will be honest, they don't move as linearly, because you might have something out of number-based 10, and then you have something else that would be out of a different domain. And so as we're learning ratios and proportions, we might be like meandering through multiple domains. But the language arts ones are pretty straightforward. And if you're teaching even if you're teaching like science or social studies, you can also use the language arts, and there's also science and technical standards that are on there. But what I train teachers to do is, let's say you're going to read a book, let's say you're reading Chrysanthemum if you're in elementary, and I know there was a high school teacher in here. Let's say you're reading Catcher in the Rye if you're a high school teacher. And you are thinking to yourself, okay, well, which standards do I want to hit with this book? Okay, well, maybe I want to hit, I'm going to do standard number 3, which is really about character development, because Chrysanthemum and Holden Caulfield are both very strong characters. So what you could do is you could take this strip, and on my website, these are in Microsoft Word on purpose. So you can take them and manipulate them. You can change the words so that they're student friendly if you've got, real little kids, or you can cut just grade 1, 2, and 3, or 4 and 5, and I have these all the way up through grade 12. So you might take the strip that is about standard 3 and then paste it onto another Word document. Then you might say, okay, now I want to do a writing standard, and I'm going to have them write an opinion piece, because Holden and Chrysanthemum are both very opinionated. So you can scroll down through the document and get to the writing one, and you can just copy and paste the opinion writing standards for your appropriate grade band onto your other sheet of paper. And then you might say, okay, when they're doing the writing of the opinion writing, I'm going to focus correct on a few of the grammatical areas. So then you can go through and copy and paste what grammar pieces you want. So you create kind of this grid of what you're trying to get kids to do in the unit, and then they can very concretely see where they're working at grade level, below, and above. And then you can start to put in positive rewards where you say, okay, so if everybody gets pushes themselves to go 1 grade level above where we are right now, if everybody does that, then, on Friday we all, get a treat out of the good job jar or something like that. So you can set in some positive motivators for kids to want to push themselves, not even just to their grade level work, but beyond their grade level. And what's really interesting is when you do this, truly what you hear from kids over and over is, that's all you wanted? I can do that. So when you think about building expectancy in kids, giving them a good roadmap of where they are now and where they're going, and so that they can get there as their own drivers, is absolutely imperative. Then when you start to think about creating a lesson, and this is from chapter 5 of the book, so I'm just kind of going through the center chapters that are really around classroom assessment. But once you go through and you decide, okay, so now I've done some pre-assessments, I know where kids are, I want to create this lesson, so then what do you do? Well, first thing you need to do is make sure that kids actually can articulate the expectations, the learning target. And so when you think about the tool I just showed you, you can use that to really help them articulate, what do you expect from them? I mean, it's pretty clear to say, I can recall key details and facts such as who, what, when, where, why, and how. That is a really clear target. And so if they can articulate that, and then if you also are giving them, this builds on what you did when you were able to answer key details, or you give them that vertical stretch so that they understand, oh, this is connected to what I did last year in Mr. So-and-so's class, or this is connected to what we just started to do in this class. Then they understand where they're headed. And I want you to think about, I know in Ohio and in Florida too, I think there has been a lot of teacher evaluation work, and I know in Ohio we had to write student learning objectives, and then and I know they do those in Texas because a group of Ohio people went to Texas to learn how to do it. But when you think about how scary that was when you were first learning, especially because it's high stakes, it matters for your teacher evaluation. And so you've got to write these SLOs, or funnily enough in Virginia they call them SOLs, which I think is hysterical. But anyways, you have to write these, and it's scary. And so if somebody comes in to train you on them and they tell you what the expectations are, and then you're like, okay, well now I at least know what I'm supposed to do and what the point of the SLOs or the student targets or whatever. But how much easier does it get them when they say, and by the way, here's an example that is a great example of, a perfect student learning objective. Then you're like, oh, okay, well that totally makes sense to me now. So again, how do you give them, when you're thinking of your lesson, articulate your expectations by showing them the vertical articulation of how the the content grew upon itself. Show them an example of what you expect, and then ask the students to assess where they are. And what you'll find is that most students are pretty darn honest. They'll tell you exactly where they are. And in fact, I saw the guy who invented Coursera at a tech conference once. He was a keynote speaker, and his name is Ning, and I think it's Ning, it's N-G. But he invented Coursera, which is a massive open online, it's like Khan Academy or one of those big places where you can take courses for free. Well, he was giving a course on something around computer science, and he ended up having like 40,000 students. So you think the 26 to 30 is bad. Can you imagine having 40,000 students? How would you ever grade all that work? And so what he did, because he's really smart and he's a computer programmer, is he created something where he would have a video of himself, and in the video he would show the students what they were supposed to do for the project. He would walk them through an evaluation. So he would show an example that met expectations and an example that didn't, and he would walk them through the rubric. So the students had to watch this little quick video on how to actually assess their work. And then when they turned their work in, they had to turn in a self-assessment and 2 peer assessments. And wouldn't you know it, when he ran his research to find out, did they actually adequately assess where they were, the students and their peer assessment and their self-assessment were almost 1-to-1 correlation. So what they said about themselves and what the peers said about them were almost identical. In fact, it was the professors who graded them differently, and they actually graded them easier than the students or the self-perception. And why is that? Because they knew exactly what was expected and they had seen a sample. So think about your own classroom. How much are kids fumbling around in the dark hoping that they can figure out what you're looking for? And that's when a lot of times too, when they're not clear on the content, you start getting the students who come up and every 5 minutes they're like, is this what you want? If I add another sentence, would you give me another point? Is this enough sentences? What can I do to get another? They have no idea what they're doing. They're just trying to please you. And so making sure you're really setting the stage for the lesson, and then helping the student based on where they are, set some concrete goals for themselves. And again, just like in Weight Watchers, everybody's goal weight isn't the same. And so depending on where students are, how do we set some smart goals for them to help them figure out how to close the gaps on what they already know and what they need to know? And then set another time for a formative assessment. So, okay, now you have this goal. It's a short-term goal. So let's say your unit's a week long, and you say, okay, I want to see you tomorrow because you've got a lot of little steps you need to do to get to the end goal that's due on Friday. So tomorrow, I want to see if your goals are met. And then you check in with them tomorrow and do a little, so now you're formatively assessing, did they meet the goals that you set? So you set the little mini goals. And by the way, that's a really powerful strategy for kids who have ADHD because they need help breaking down projects into smaller chunks. And so if you have a unit that's going to be a week long, to be able to set times for little formative assessments along the way can be really important. Some of the schools I work with that are really trying to get into the formative assessment, one of the things that drives me crazy is when I go in there and they have a formative assessment schedule. That doesn't really even make sense with the conception of what formative assessment is. Like, it doesn't make any sense to say we're going to give every kid a formative assessment on Friday. Well, what if the kid's ready on Wednesday for the summative assessment? Why are we setting up structures? And it goes back in the very beginning when I showed you that block model versus the spaghetti model of education. So we have that factory model versus the reality and lived experience, which I call the spaghetti model. If we know that spaghetti model is true, we keep trying to lay the factory model on top of that spaghetti model, and it doesn't work. So this is what I would suggest when you're thinking about creating your lesson, is how do you create the lesson so they know what they're doing, they've seen examples, they have a chance to assess where they are and set their own goals based on where they are, and then how do you work with them to check in? The issue that we run into is the foundation of this system is data. And, as you think about creating engaging lessons all the way back to that expectancy piece, we can't do that if we don't have good data. And what I have found is that a lot of teachers, because of the way we are trained, teachers know their content for their grade level. But if you're a fourth grade teacher for 10 years and then I tell you you have to be a second grade teacher, most teachers would be breaking out into hives going, oh my goodness, I got to learn all this new curriculum and what they do. You shouldn't have to, because the curriculum builds upon itself. So if we become experts at that vertical progression, which is like the tool I showed you from my website, if we become experts on that vertical progression, then we know what data to collect. It goes back to the Christmas tree. We know what should be in the packages and we know what should be in the star. And so when we're creating our classroom assessments, assignments, projects, we know that we're able to collect data that's going to be meaningful to tell us where that child is in the learning progression. But one of the things that I see happen all the time in education is we do not know how to measure, and so we don't know how to attribute. So imagine if the Ohio State University hired me to be a basketball coach, and I've got the team, I got all the kids out and said, okay, line up against the wall, tallest to shortest. And then I just took the tall five guys, the five tallest guys, and said, you're my starters. I would be fired, because what if they have no ball handling skills? What if they can't work as a team? What if they can't dribble? So I've only taken one measure that is narrow, which is their height. And yes, it's a valid, reliable measure, but it only measures height. And I have now made an attribution that that measurement tells me whether or not someone's a good basketball player. And that is a completely false attribution. But we do this all the time. Reading scores, I see, they'll say, oh, he's so low. Well, in what? And then they'll say, well, his reading scores are so low. Okay, well, what are you giving him? If you're giving him a DRA, or you're giving him a Fontes and Pinnell for reading, or if you're giving, whatever you're giving him, what are the dimensions of reading that test measures? So if you're giving a reading test that measures fluency and word recognition, but you're doing a lesson on sentence comprehension, then, maybe that child is slow, but maybe they have no problem with comprehension. And so, reading skills and phonics skills are not thinking skills. But what happens is we make horrible attributions based on a narrow range of scores, and then we group students based on those attributions, and that destroys a sense of efficacy, because now the kid knows I'm always in the dumb group, even though, and they know which group's the, quote-unquote low group, or, bluebirds, redbirds, whatever they're called. They know when they're in the quote-unquote dumb group. And so they end up with a reduced sense of efficacy because we took one score and extrapolated it to mean everything under the planet. That would be the same thing as me saying, and I'll get a little edgy here, but that would be the same thing as me saying that one value-added score for a teacher would really, indicate teacher quality. Doesn't that seem kind of strange? So we get upset when it's done to us, and rightfully so, but we do that to kids all the time. So my challenge to you is to be go investigate the assessments you give kids. What do they actually mean? What do they measure? And what do kids have to do on those assessments? Because that will help you understand, okay, so maybe this measures, I'm even thinking about when you engage with special education. If a child has a test for various cognitive abilities, and maybe they score low on something like fluid reasoning. Okay, well, what is that? And what are the tasks that child was asked to do that he or she could not demonstrate? Because how do you change your teaching and approach the student with where the student needs support if you don't understand what they didn't know how to do? So again, going back to that Christmas tree, getting the right data and then using multiple measures of data and making sure that you're using the right tool to measure what you're trying to measure. And right now in a lot of schools, it's just really the more is better kind of philosophy. So those are some things that are a little bit out of your control as far as what kinds of vendor-based assessments you give. But in your classroom, there's some things you can do. So you can try integrating assessment into instructional design. So start out, give the children a fill-in-the-blank or a short answer test, and then use their incorrect answers to identify the faulty thinking. So this kind of goes back to that fail board I mentioned. Always, always, always in your classroom assessment, have a place for students to indicate if they guessed. Because what happens is sometimes you write a really crummy question, and then all the kids figure out how to get the answer, and so they answer it right, but that doesn't mean they know the content. It means it was a bad question. And so you might think about, having them indicate if they guessed, and then you can go back and look at your question and say, wow, if, 70% of the kids guessed and got it right, maybe I need to change what I'm doing. And then keeping track of this, how the students progress in the summative assessment, and then working them to get to a higher level rather than just a recall of content. So you can, throughout a unit, you can give kids quick multiple choice questions that will get at the faulty thinking, where each one of the distractors in the multiple choice is a type of faulty thinking. But then when you get to the summative assessment, you can really push them into higher levels of thinking. So I'll give you a concrete example. Let's say that our student-friendly learning target, that SFLT, is students can make generalizations. So students pretend they read about meat-eating plants, and then the question is, what generalizations can you make about how these plants lure their prey? And so then ask yourself as a teacher, when you look at the learning targets you put up, can you identify what the faulty thinking is? Because when I do this exercise with teachers, it takes a long time for them to get what the distractors should be. And so this can be a really powerful, get the wrong answer with the kids can help you figure out what the faulty thinking is, and to work in your teacher teams to really understand, when we're teaching this concept, here's the pitfalls that will happen. And so when you think about the meat-eating plants, the right answer is going to be an answer that's true and extends, and that's generalizing. Some wrong answers might make a statement that's true for what the evidence is presented, but it's too broad and it's an overgeneralization. So for example, they may say, meat-eating plants lure their prey with their green color. Well, that's true in this case, but not all of them are green. And so that's an overgeneralization from this plant to generalize that to all. Some might be no generalization. Venus flytraps use color, and they use the red color and, something sticky to attract bugs. And so that's true for this case, but there's no generalization. Or they have something like Venus flytraps eat people, and that would be a statement that is not true at all, doesn't have anything to do with it. That's a, play. So if you can think about in your teams, when you're creating pre-assessments and some of the assessments that you're going to work on together that everybody's doing throughout the year, you can work together to identify those distractors and then create some multiple choice questions and have a bank of them that you can all pull from for formative assessments. And what's nice about this is that, imagine being able to go to one of your PLCs or teacher-based teams or whatever kind of collaborative, whatever you call your collaborative groups. But imagine being able to go there and give this as a pre-assessment and then be able to say, well, 62% of the students in our grade gave no generalization, and 20% of them gave an overgeneralization, and the rest of them got it right. And so that then is going to tell you, okay, so how am I going to go about closing the gaps? Now I know what the problem is, because if the problem is I'm overgeneralizing, then my remediation as the teacher shouldn't be teaching kids to make a generalization. They're making one, they're overgeneralizing. So it helps you to pinpoint with more precision how you're going to remediate, and it's just more efficient. The number one complaint for teachers is, I don't have time. This is an example of why you don't have time, if you don't know the answer to why kids are getting things wrong. So as I said earlier, the goal of assessment isn't what do kids know. The goal of assessment is why don't they know what they don't know, so that I can make sure I fill the gaps. You can do this in math as well. So, here's what's the range of the following matrix? So just create a second question. Why do you think that? And then give some suggestions, and then you can get at why did they answer the question the way they did. And then when you give them feedback, you want to think about how do I build a sense of efficacy through the feedback? And so one of the suggestions I would have is that we will sometimes praise kids for a variable that they don't feel like they can control, like intelligence. Like saying things like, I knew you were smart, you just had to try. Or I knew that, you could do it and there was a good writer in there. And saying things about the child versus the effort, the variable you can control. You studied 3 words a day all week and you got 100% on your spelling test. I'm very proud of you. Now that's an effort and a variable that they can control. So it builds sort of an if-then statement for them. If I do this, then this will happen. And so when you think about, and I know earlier we talked a little bit about, students coming from poverty, students who come from poverty and students who come from disorganized homes, which transcends all socioeconomic levels. don't really build if-then statements. So, you might be a kid who you get an A on a paper and you go home and you don't get dinner and you sleep in a car. And then the next day you're a complete donkey at school, but you're at Walmart at 11 o'clock at night and you get a sucker. And so there's no consistency in if-then statements. So as you're thinking about giving feedback, we talked about sort of how do we motivate them. Then we moved, remember that positivity wheel I showed in the beginning. We have motivation, then performance, then feedback. So we talked about motivating them through positivity, and then we've talked a little bit about how to create instruction that might be engaging, and which would be the actual performance you're asking of students. And now we're talking about the feedback. How do you actually provide feedback that will motivate them to want to do the act again? And so if you can give them feedback on the performance rather than on themselves, that's going to give them more information to help them understand, how do I repeat that cycle again? How do I get a sense of efficacy and purpose that I know I can do this, and then I'm going to be motivated to repeat the positive action. So here are some things you can say. It looks to me like you put a lot of effort into your paragraph. Tell me what you did. Or you should be proud. You did, you studied 3 times this week and look at what a positive impact it had. Or this time's better than the last time. So you can see those kinds of prompts are prompts that are going to get kids to start talking about their process versus the product that they created, versus, look, you got an A, I knew you were smart, you just needed to show it. Or look, when you focused, I knew that there was a good math student in there. This is something that drives me absolutely insane when I go into schools, is that in an effort to be positive, teachers have started picking up this language where they say, I like it when you sit quietly, and I like it when Susie has her pencil out, and I like it when everybody's, getting their work done, and I like it, I like it, I like you. But here's the question. Who cares what you like? And what if they don't like you? And so now what that message is in the way that you speak about that is that your job as a student is to make sure that I like your behavior. Your job, going back to the weight loss thing, think of those different pills you can take. The locus of control is external. So the child's behavior is not because I'm doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. It's I'm doing the right thing so I can please Mrs. So-and-so because she likes it when I do that. So it internalizes that quality work means pleasing the teacher. This kind of language is what breeds the kids that come up every 15 seconds and ask you, is this what you want? Is this what you want? What if I add this? Well, if I add another sentence, is that what you want? Because they aren't focused on the learning. They haven't understood in their performance of what you're asking them to do, the motivation for their performance. You think about that positivity wheel. They're motivated to do the performance because they want to please you. The performance they do then is therefore directly tied to you, and so they're constantly bugging you and asking you if they're doing the right thing. And then the feedback that you give, I like it when you're, studying hard. I like it when you're putting your pencil in your, bag or whatever you're saying. You're reinforcing that this whole cycle of learning isn't about learning, it's about you. And so, really think about trying to break that habit, because what we want to do is empower kids. We want to empower them to say, I can do this because I know the roadmap to get me there. I know that when I study 3 words a day, I get an A on the exam. Not, I think that's this. And I hear a lot of that language when I observe students aren't talking about the content, they're talking about what does the teacher want. The other thing is that, if we want kids to get in the driver's seat and we want that feedback, there should be some self-feedback. So in addition to positive feedback that you can offer, there should also be some self-assessment. So, have them keep track of their process and maybe prepare a chart with the learning target and then have them chart their results so that they know what they know and where they need to go. Because again, if somebody else is in control of your data and never tells you what it is, what's the likelihood that you'll change your behavior? So if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, so I took your blood and you've got all kinds of problems going on, so my prescription for you is no more chocolate, no more wine, and you need to run 4 miles a day. What's the likelihood that you're going to do any of those things? Not very. But if you see the data and you see, wow, your sugar level is here and it should be here, and here's what happens if your sugar level stays there. Now it's about you. It's not about the doctor told me I had to do something. So we need to help get kids involved in self-assessing. Furthermore, if we're talking about developing lifelong learners and global citizens for a 21st century workforce and all those other mission statements that we have, we need to have people who are self-directed. We need to have people who know what they need to do and can set a goal and meet that goal. When students do self-assessment, you have to teach them how to do that. So first they need to make judgments about what they know, and then they need to show evidence in their work as rationale for their judgment. So I know that I have mastered the concept of double-digit addition because I have answered 10 out of 10 on this last question. Or, I know that I tend to, thinking about that faulty thinking, I tend to forget to carry the number when I'm adding big numbers. And I know that I do this because of the quiz that you gave, the 4 problems I missed, this was the faulty thinking I did. And so what I'm going to do in order to overcome that is I'm going to do A, B, and C checks. And that's where you can help the student figure out what do you do to close the gap. And, ask yourself that. Can your students talk intelligently about where they are and what they're learning? Because if the answer is no, we need to close that gap in your classroom. Self-assessment is really powerful, and a lot of times people say, oh, well, that's, really sophisticated. My kids couldn't do that. But that's actually not true. In fact, elementary students can do it. And the largest gains that we saw in elementary students were achieved by the kids who were the self-monitoring group. And so, think about that for a minute and think back to that Coursera example I gave. When we know what's expected and we have a sample that gives us a visual, concrete picture of, oh, that's what you want, then it is not that hard to expect any kid at any age to understand where they are in relation to that sample and that clear expectation. We also know that self-assessment is more powerful for the lower achieving students, because that's the second thing people will say, well, the little ones can't do that. Yes, they can. And then the second thing they'll say is, well, maybe my really gifted students could keep track of that kind of stuff, but my other students couldn't. Well, yes, they can, actually. So when they use a reflective assessment cycle, the lower achieving students benefited the most from that process. So here's what I want you to think about, and then we have about 9 minutes to take some questions. But when I have these sessions in person and I'll ask teachers, how many of you did not pass your driving exam the first time? And if you want to, you can raise your hand. But how many of you did not pass your driving test? And I always have somebody who says, I didn't pass my driving test. And so when we think, thank you, Richard, be brave. But, here's my question. So, Richard, are you not allowed to drive on highways? Or are you only allowed to drive like secondhand cars? Or do you have to have some type of special designation on your license plate that says, yeah, he's mastered it, but he didn't master it the first time. And so we're going to forever scarlet letter him that he needs to be, set aside. And we do that in education. And so the whole point is, mastery is the goal. It's not that blocked model where everybody, marches in the same tune. It's about the learning, and it's about helping the kids accelerate their learning as much as they can. Once they've mastered it, why do we punish them that it took them a little longer to get there? That doesn't make any sense at all. And when you think about, people say, well, gosh, I have to move on. I have to move on. I have content to cover. I can't just keep going back over this. And I understand that. But a backup plan, first of all, if you design lessons, if you have assessment that will show you exactly where kids are, and if you design lessons that address that vertical articulation of how the content grows, then you have a better shot of getting kids to grow faster and being more efficient about tailoring your remediation and your lessons to what the kids actually need. So again, going back to the meat-eating plant, if none of the kids overgeneralize, then you don't need to teach that. You just need to teach them where they struggled. And so we can be much more efficient and targeted in how we teach, and therefore we don't have as many kids that would fall through the crack. In addition to that, what they've researched, how long does it actually take to go back and remediate and do a backup plan? And what research tells us, it takes about 10 to 15% of the time to do a backup lesson of whatever the lesson was. So if you spent an hour on a lesson, it takes about 10 to 15% of an hour. So 10 to 15 minutes of an hour, or not even that, that would be a quarter of it. But 10 to 15% of that 60 minutes is all it takes to remediate. And so think about that for a minute. If we did it the first time, if we just did it right on the beginning, we wouldn't have so many kids who are in 7th and 8th grade who are still doing the basic math, because we could fill those gaps much, much earlier and be much, much more efficient. So going back to just kind of some final thoughts, as you're thinking about engaging instruction, engaging assessment, and engaging classroom management, they all kind of follow the same pattern. A child's motivated to do something, and you have a lot of control over that. Does the child expect to do well, and do they value what they're doing? If they do, they'll be motivated, and you have a huge role in building that expectancy and value through the way you do your lessons, the way you set up your classroom management, the way you talk to students. And then the performance comes, and you have a huge amount of control in that too. You can design instruction and design performances for kids that are engaging, that borrow from advertising, that we know will work to motivate kids, that, you know, we can show them the vertical articulation of what we're trying to accomplish. And then finally, there's that feedback piece. So how are you giving them feedback, you know, daily on projects, on assignments, on everything they're doing, so that they will be remotivated to do a positive performance again. And so that's, you know, I want you to think about what would be your plan, and how do you start to build this positivity wheel. So that's what I have for you tonight. I hope that this has been useful for you. This is my contact information. I work with schools quite a bit, so if you're interested in talking about having me come and work with your school, I would love that. My email is right there. If you have any additional questions after we get off and you think about it for a little while and you're like, you know what, I really want more information on something, you are more than welcome to email me anytime and I will get back with you. The other thing is, a lot of the content that I'm talking about insofar as the assessment and the lesson design is in our book, It's Not About the Test. And so that's available at Amazon, and I believe there's a link down in the workshop link area where you can link to that if you were interested in purchasing that book. I also have on my website, I get busy and I don't do it very often, but I write blogs periodically, and then I also have a newsletter. So if some of the things that I talk about in regard to motivation and ADHD are interesting to you, if you go to my website and click on the Contact Us, you can click on there and sign up for a newsletter. So once a month, I basically send you it's called Dr. Riegel's Reading List, and it just has a link to an article and like a quick 1 to 2 sentence about what the article is addressing. And then you can choose to read what you want or not read. You know, if something doesn't interest you, that's fine too. But it's just to help connect you to the literature on what we know, because we do know what works. We just have to start to do it. So thank you for your time, and I will stay on here to take any questions or any other feedback that you might have.
All right, well, thank you, Lisa, so much for joining us tonight for this workshop. And we do have the links to her website and LinkedIn page as well on the bottom. And if you do have any questions, you could always contact us or contact Lisa at any time, and we're always here to help. So if there's anything else that we can do to provide some support for your teachers and some training, just let us know. And we thank you so much. And please take a few seconds. Either you can do it now or click on it and save it for later. The SurveyMonkey link I put in the chat box there. We do love to get your feedback, because if this is your first time joining us in the Learning Liaisons, we do provide a wide variety of workshops online, so I always like to get your feedback so we can make these the best experience possible. So I just posted that again, and I want to thank you guys once again. And this is recorded, so once we edit it and format it, we will be sending it out to the registration list, so you will get access to this video and also be on our website as well with some of the other workshop recordings we have. So thank you once again, Lisa, for taking time out of your schedule, and feel free to share some closing remarks, and then we can wrap it up.
Thank you. Well, just, you know, the biggest piece of advice is, you know, when I do presentations, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming because there's just a lot to think about. And it's not about throwing out what you do. It's about just being more mindful and tweaking around the edges. There's so many ways you can have a huge impact by just thinking through that question of, when I give kids something to do, does the thing I give them yield me the information about why they know what they know and why they don't? And I'm glad I made somebody in here feel uncomfortable. I just got the little note in the workshop chat. But that was the point. And so hopefully it didn't make you too uncomfortable and get you completely overwhelmed. But please definitely reach out if you have any questions.
All right, well, thank you. We're going to sign off now, and we will let you know when this will be available for you guys to watch online. Thanks again, Lisa, and thanks for everybody for taking the time out of
Thanks. Good night.
us.